When we talk about the relationship between the United States and India, the first thing that comes to mind is the word allies. For years, politicians, diplomats, and media outlets repeated the phrase natural allies as if it were destiny written in stone. They posed for photographs, signed trade agreements, launched joint military exercises, and told the world that this was a partnership for the future. On the surface, it looked strong. But here's the truth: strength is never about how something appears, it's about what it is made of. And if you build an alliance on appearances, you are not building strength, you are building an illusion. You see, illusions are powerful. They can inspire confidence. They can make people believe they are part of something bigger than themselves, but illusions are fragile. They break the moment reality pushes against them. And that's what we saw with the US and India. It wasn't a breakup that happened overnight. It was the slow unraveling of something that looked solid but was always hollow inside. Think about relationships in life, between people, between friends, even between partners in business. If two individuals are connected only because it looks good, but deep down their values, their goals, and their trust don't align, how long can that connection survive? Not long, because sooner or later, life tests every relationship. Pressure comes, temptation comes, challenges come, and the illusion is exposed. Nations are no different. The United States wanted India to be a loyal partner against China, against Russia, against whoever was the rival of the day. India wanted recognition as an equal, as a rising power that could stand on its own terms. These are not the foundations of true partnership. These are the ingredients of a fragile deal designed to look impressive but destined to collapse. The illusion of partnership was maintained for years because it served both sides temporarily. America got to say, look, we have India on our side. India got to say, look, we are working with the world's most powerful country. Both sides benefited in perception, but perception without substance is like a body without muscle. It may fill the frame, but it has no power when the real test comes. And this is where psychology comes in. At a psychological level, illusions are comforting. They let you postpone difficult conversations. They let you avoid the uncomfortable truth that maybe you don't fully trust the other person, or in this case, the other nation. But comfort is dangerous. Comfort can make you weak, and weakness always gets exposed. The US kept assuming India would play the role of a junior partner. India kept assuming America would eventually respect its independence. Neither side confronted the truth directly, and so the illusion lasted until it couldn't anymore. Philosophically, it's worth asking, why do we create illusions in the first place? Because human beings, and nations too, are addicted to the idea of certainty. We don't like uncertainty. We want to believe in permanence. We want to believe that if something looks good, it will stay good, but reality doesn't work that way. Reality is always testing, and when the test came, when trade disputes intensified, when America started policing India's democratic practices, when India refused to follow Washington blindly on foreign policy, the illusion crumbled. The lesson here is powerful, and it applies not only to geopolitics but also to our personal lives. Do not build your partnerships on image. Do not build them on the comfort of illusions. Build them on substance. Build them on respect. Build them on alignment of values and mutual recognition of strength. Because when pressure comes, and it always does, it is not the photo ops or the speeches that hold things together. It is the truth beneath them. The US-India partnership was, for too long, a stage performance. Both sides played their parts well, but the script was weak. And when the curtain fell, what was left was disappointment, finger pointing, and the realization that there was never as much there as people believed. And so, when we ask who is responsible for this breakup, the first answer is simple. Both nations are responsible for believing in an illusion rather than demanding a reality. And if there is one takeaway from this, one message that I want you to carry with you, it is this: never let the appearance of strength fool you. True strength is not about how things look. It is about how they endure. When we talk about why relationships break apart, whether it's between two people or two nations, one of the most overlooked reasons is identity. Identity is not just a word. It is the core of who you are, how you see yourself, and how you want the world to see you. If that identity is challenged, ignored, or disrespected, there is no foundation strong enough to hold the relationship together. And this is exactly what happened with the United States and India. America looked at India and saw a strategic partner, a potential ally to balance against China and Russia. But the problem is this: America wanted India to fit into its story, into its role, like an actor cast in a movie that was already written. And India said, no, we are not just an actor in your script. We are the writer of our own story. That is the clash. Not about money, not about military, not even about trade. At the deepest level, it was about identity. You see, India has always carried a strong sense of who it is. Even during the Cold War, when the world was divided into two camps, India refused to belong to either. It chose something called strategic autonomy. In simple words, it meant we will work with you when it benefits us, but we will not be anyone's puppet. This has been India's philosophy for decades. It is part of its DNA, part of its national psychology. To expect India to suddenly give that up and stand behind America in every battle, it was never realistic. But here's the thing, America is also defined by its own identity. Its identity is that of the leader, the one who sets the agenda, the one who others follow. It is not used to dealing with equals, and it struggles when a partner refuses to fall in line. This created tension because every time Washington expected loyalty, New Delhi asserted independence. Every time America said, "You are with us, right?" India said, "We are with ourselves first." This is not betrayal. This is identity in action. Psychologically, it is the same in personal life. Imagine two friends. One sees themselves as the leader, the decision maker, the one who calls the shots. The other sees themselves as independent, self-reliant, and unwilling to be led. Can these two personalities get along? Maybe for a while when the interests overlap. But sooner or later there will be conflict, because identity is not negotiable. You can compromise on preferences, you can negotiate on interests, but identity, who you are, is non-negotiable. Philosophically, this teaches us something profound about power. True power is not forcing someone to play your role. True power is recognizing the role they want to play and still finding a way to work together. The US did not fully understand this with India. It kept pushing for alignment, and each push only reminded India more strongly that it had to resist. And the more India resisted, the more America felt frustrated, even betrayed. This is the cycle that destroyed the illusion of partnership. There is another layer here, and it is about respect. Respect is not just a nice word, it is the currency of all human and political relationships. The US often spoke to India as if it was a junior partner, someone still on the way up, someone that needed guidance. But India does not see itself that way. India sees itself as a civilization thousands of years old, as a rising global power, as a nation that does not need permission to act. Every time respect was denied, friction grew, and without respect, even the strongest alliances collapse. What makes this lesson important is that it goes far beyond geopolitics. Each of us has faced moments where someone tried to define us, put us in a box, make us fit their expectations. Maybe it was at work, maybe in a relationship, maybe in society itself. And in those moments, you have two choices. Either you give in and lose your identity, or you resist and risk conflict. India chose resistance because it understood that without identity, no amount of partnership is worth having. This is the bigger truth. Identity is strength, and strength demands recognition. If you ignore it, you don't just create misunderstandings, you create breakups. That's why the US-India relationship unraveled the way it did. Not because of one policy or one leader, but because of a deep and unavoidable clash of identities. So, when we ask who is responsible, the answer is simple: both are responsible, because both failed to respect and reconcile the power of identity. And the message for all of us is clear. Do not let anyone else define who you are. Do not trade your identity for short-term comfort. Build relationships, yes, but build them as yourself, not as someone else's idea of you. Because in the end, strength comes from standing tall in your own identity and never allowing it to be diminished. When you look at the surface of international politics, you often see handshakes, big smiles, leaders calling each other friends, and fancy announcements about billion-dollar trade deals. It looks impressive, it looks like cooperation. But if you look deeper, if you look behind the curtain, you find something else. You find competition, you find rivalry. And in the case of the United States and India, you find an economic struggle that was slowly poisoning the relationship long before anyone admitted it. The truth is this: nations are driven by self-interest. They may speak the language of partnership, but they act in the logic of advantage. And nowhere is this more clear than in economics. America saw India not only as a partner, but also as a competitor in technology, in pharmaceuticals, in digital markets, and in the global economy of the future. At the same time, India looked at America and saw a giant who wanted to dominate its markets, restrict its industries, and limit its rise. That tension was always there, hiding behind the diplomatic smiles. Think about it, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with a huge population, a skilled workforce, and an expanding tech sector. For American companies, India was a goldmine. But for Indian leaders, that goldmine could easily become a trap if they allowed foreign corporations to take too much control. So while American businesses wanted more access, fewer restrictions, and greater influence, India pushed back. It protected its industries, demanded local investment, and rejected the idea of becoming dependent. This was not just about economics, it was about dignity, sovereignty, and survival. And let's be honest here, America does not like competition, especially from a rising power. Washington loves to celebrate free markets until someone else starts winning. Then suddenly there are tariffs, sanctions, restrictions on technology transfers, and pressure to play by rules that America itself bends whenever convenient. India saw this and it didn't forget. Every trade dispute, every block technology deal, every lecture about intellectual property. These were not just technical disagreements, they were signals. Signals that said, "We don't trust you to grow too strong." Psychologically, this is the same as when a mentor starts to feel threatened by the student. At first, the mentor is proud, guiding, supportive. But when the student becomes too capable, too independent, the relationship changes. The mentor feels insecure and suddenly cooperation turns into rivalry. That is what happened with the US and India. America liked India as long as it was rising within limits. But once India started to look like a true economic competitor, the smiles hit a different feeling: fear. Philosophically, it teaches us a timeless truth about human nature. We say we want others to succeed. We say we want partnerships, but deep down, people often want the other person to succeed only up to the point where they don't threaten our position. Beyond that point, admiration turns into resentment. The US admired India's growth, but when that growth looked unstoppable, resentment set in, and resentment always eats away at trust. This is why the so-called partnership was always fragile. You cannot build a lasting relationship when one side feels exploited and the other side feels threatened. The economics made the illusion collapse even faster, because once you introduce suspicion into trade, into technology, into finance, every other area of cooperation starts to erode. Military exercises look less impressive, cultural exchanges feel less authentic, and diplomatic statements become hollow. Without economic trust, everything else becomes a show. And let's not forget the biggest factor of all: independence. India did not want to rely on American corporations for its future. It wanted to build its own technological giants, its own pharmaceutical industries, its own digital platforms. That independence is power, and power is never given. It is taken. America understood this and it didn't like it. So the economic rivalry became the hidden battlefield of the relationship. Now I want you to think about this not just as politics, but as life itself. How often do we smile at people while secretly feeling competitive with them? How often do we celebrate someone's progress, but deep down we don't want them to pass us? This is the psychology of rivalry. And if we are not honest about it, it destroys friendships, partnerships, and even families. The US and India were trapped in this same psychology, pretending to be partners while silently measuring who was getting stronger. In the end, it wasn't tariffs or trade barriers that broke the illusion. It was the deeper truth that both sides were afraid of each other's strength, and fear is the enemy of trust. Once fear enters a relationship, everything else is just decoration. So when we ask who is responsible for the breakup, we must look beyond the speeches and the headlines. It was the rivalry in disguise, the competition hidden behind the smiles, that poisoned the bond. And the lesson for all of us is clear: never mistake a smile for trust. True partnership can only exist when both sides are unafraid of each other's growth. Anything less is just a performance. When relationships start to break, it is rarely because of the obvious disagreements. It is often because of something more subtle, something that cuts deeper than money or strategy. And between the United States and India, that deeper wound was the question of values. On paper, both nations called themselves democracies. Both nations claimed to stand for freedom, for human rights, for dignity. But when those words became weapons, the partnership could not survive. You see, America has a habit. It uses values as tools of foreign policy. It preaches democracy when it wants influence. It criticizes human rights when it wants leverage. And while the intentions may sometimes be sincere, very often they are selective. America rarely criticizes its closest allies with the same intensity it reserves for countries that don't follow its lead. This is where the trouble began, because India saw these lectures not as guidance, but as interference. And when a nation feels that its sovereignty is being challenged under the disguise of moral superiority, resistance is inevitable. India's psychology has always been clear. It values independence, dignity, and the right to make its own choices. Every time Washington pointed fingers at New Delhi over religious tensions, media freedom, or internal politics, India did not hear advice. It heard something else. It heard the message: you are not good enough. You need to be corrected. And no proud nation will accept that, especially not one that sees itself as a rising global power. Let's bring this down to the personal level. Imagine you have a friend who constantly lectures you on how to live, how to behave, how to act, even when you never asked for their opinion. At first, maybe you tolerate it. You nod, you smile, you ignore it. But over time, it creates distance. Because advice without respect becomes an insult. This is the exact psychology that shaped the US-India dynamic. Philosophically, it raises a very important question. Can values be universal if they are used selectively? The truth is, values lose their power the moment they are used as weapons. Freedom, democracy, human rights, these are powerful principles when they are lived, not when they are imposed. When America used these values to pressure India into obedience, the values stopped being bridges and started being walls. Instead of bringing the two nations closer, they drove them apart. Now, let's be clear, India is not perfect. No country is. Every democracy has flaws, every nation has contradictions. But the point here is not perfection. The point is respect. Respect means you allow others to grow on their own terms. Respect means you recognize that sovereignty is sacred. And respect means you don't use lofty ideals as excuses for control. The United States failed to understand this, and so every statement about democracy became a spark that ignited tension. There is also a deeper psychological truth here. Human beings do not reject criticism because it is false. They reject it because it feels imposed. We don't like being told what to do, even when the advice is correct, if it comes without respect. And nations, just like individuals, live by this same psychology. The moment you make someone feel judged, they stop listening. They stop cooperating. And eventually, they stop trusting. This is what happened. The U.S. thought it was promoting values, but India thought it was being controlled. Two different perceptions, two different truths, and the gap between them grew wider with each passing year, until finally the language of values became the language of conflict. And here lies the real tragedy. Values are supposed to unite us. They are supposed to remind us of our shared humanity, our higher purpose, the principles that rise above borders. But when values are misused, they become just another weapon in the struggle for power. Instead of inspiring, they divide. Instead of empowering, they dominate. Instead of healing, they wound. This is why the partnership cracked. Not because democracy is bad, not because human rights don't matter, but because they were used without respect, without humility, and without consistency. That is the danger we all must watch for, not just in politics, but in life, because every one of us holds values, and the question is, do we live them, or do we use them against others? The lesson is simple. If you want a strong partnership, whether between nations or between people, do not weaponize your values. Live them, embody them, show them through action, not lectures. Because action inspires, but preaching without respect only destroys. And so the breakup was not just about economics or strategy, it was about dignity. It was about respect. It was about the difference between living your values and using them as tools. That difference made all the difference. And here's the takeaway I want you to remember. Values are powerful, but only when they are lived with humility. The moment you use them as weapons, you may win the argument, but you will lose the relationship. And in the end, relationships are worth far more than arguments. Sometimes in life, the biggest mistakes do not come from weakness. They come from overconfidence. They come from believing that you already know how the game will play out, that others will move according to your script, that your strength alone will carry the day. This is exactly what happened with the United States and India. The American strategy was simple on paper: bring India closer, make it part of the Western camp, and use it as a counterbalance against China. It looked smart, it sounded powerful, and many in Washington believed it was inevitable. But inevitability is an illusion. What looks simple in theory can collapse in practice if you ignore human psychology and national pride. The mistake here was overreach. America assumed that India would accept the role of a loyal partner, that it would join the U.S.-led order without hesitation. But this was a miscalculation rooted in arrogance, not reality, because India has never accepted being told what role to play. It has never been a nation that bends easily to the will of others. Its entire identity, its entire history is shaped by resistance to domination, first against colonialism, later against Cold War pressures, and now against great power overreach. To believe that India would suddenly abandon that identity was not strategy, it was wishful thinking. Psychologically, overreach comes from underestimating the other side. When you assume that someone will follow, you stop paying attention to their needs, their concerns, their vision. You project your own goals onto them and then get angry when they don't play along. This is what America did. It saw India not as a sovereign actor with its own ambitions, but as a tool in Washington's larger chessboard against Beijing. And nobody, no individual, no nation, likes being treated as a tool. Think of it like this. Imagine you join a team project, but instead of being treated as an equal, you're given a script and told to follow it exactly. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how much you bring to the table, your role is reduced to someone else's design. How long before frustration sets in? How long before you walk away? India felt this exact frustration. It wanted partnership, but it wanted partnership on equal terms. America offered cooperation, but only within limits that served its own strategy. That imbalance was the seed of the breakup. Philosophically, this reminds us of a timeless truth. You cannot control strong partners, you can only align with them. True leadership is not domination. True leadership is recognizing the independence of others and creating space for them to thrive. America misunderstood this. By pushing too hard, by demanding too much alignment, it alienated the very partner it needed most. And once trust is broken, once respect is lost, no amount of military exercises or trade deals can repair it. There is also a deeper lesson about power itself. Overreach is always the beginning of decline. History shows us this again and again. Empires fall not because they are weak, but because they push too far, too fast, without respecting the limits of reality. They think their power is enough to bend others indefinitely. But power without humility breeds resistance. And resistance eventually breaks the illusion of control. The US-India relationship is just one example of this eternal pattern. India made its position clear through action. It continued buying energy from Russia despite Western pressure. It refused to join military alliances formally. It cultivated partnerships with multiple players from Europe to the Middle East to Asia. These choices were not acts of betrayal, they were acts of independence. But in Washington, each of these moves was seen as disobedience. And when you start to see your partner's independence as disobedience, you have already lost the relationship. And here is the truth: we must all face the strongest partnerships are built on balance, not on control. Balance means you recognize the strength of the other. You don't try to own it. You don't try to dominate it. You let it shine because their strength makes the partnership stronger. America failed to do this with India, and so the relationship became another example of how overreach destroys opportunity. Now let's bring it back to our own lives. How many times have we ruined relationships because we tried to control them? How many times have we lost friends, partners, or allies because we assumed they would play by our script instead of respecting their independence? Overreach is not just a political mistake. It is a human mistake. It is rooted in ego, in the belief that others exist to serve our story. But the truth is, every person, every nation has their own story. And if you do not respect it, you lose them. The US-India breakup was not inevitable. It could have been avoided if humility had matched ambition, if respect had matched power. But instead, overreach turned opportunity into resentment. And once resentment takes root, even the strongest bridges can collapse. So the lesson is this: do not let your strength blind you. Do not let your ambition become overreach. Whether in politics or in life, the moment you try to control too much, you lose everything. At the heart of every relationship, whether it's between individuals or nations, lies one essential ingredient: respect. Without respect, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no partnership. And without partnership, there is no future. The breakup between the United States and India was not just about economics, not just about strategy, not just about clashing values. It was about dignity. It was about one side wanting to be seen as equal, and the other side still treating it like a junior. That imbalance poisoned the bond more than any policy ever could. You see, power is not only about strength. Power is also about perception. It's about how others see you, how they treat you, how they acknowledge your place in the world. America has long seen itself as the leader, the one giving direction, the one setting the standards, the one whose approval is the final stamp of legitimacy. But India refused to be treated that way. India's psychology is rooted in thousands of years of civilization, in the struggle for independence, in the pride of being a culture that has survived empires. That psychology demands recognition. It demands to be treated as equal. And when America failed to give that, the foundation of trust cracked. Think about your own life. Imagine working in a company where you give everything, your time, your talent, your commitment, but your boss still treats you as if you are not ready, not good enough, not deserving of a seat at the table. How long would you stay? How long before you say, enough? I want to be recognized for who I am, not for who you think I should be. Nations behave the same way. India was tired of being treated as the promising partner of the future. It wanted to be acknowledged as a power of the present. When that recognition didn't come, resentment grew. Psychologically, respect is fuel. When someone respects you, you grow stronger. You are motivated to give more, to trust more, to stay committed. But when respect is denied, it does the opposite. It kills motivation, it creates distance, it builds frustration. This is not just theory, it is basic human truth. And it applies as much to diplomacy as it does to friendships, families, or teams. The US-India story is simply a larger version of what all of us experience in our lives. The deep need for dignity. Philosophically, this exposes the limits of power. Power without respect is fragile. It may look strong, but it cannot last. America had the military, the economy, the influence, but what it lacked was humility. And humility is what turns raw power into lasting leadership. Without humility, power becomes arrogance. And arrogance always pushes people away. India demanded equality. Not dominance, not superiority, just equality. But equality requires the stronger side to let go of control, to share space, to accept that the world does not revolve around them alone. America was not ready to do that, and that is why the relationship collapsed. Now, here's the lesson for all of us in every relationship you have, personal, professional, or political. Ask yourself this question: do I make the other person feel respected? or do I make them feel small? Because no matter how much strength, money, or influence you have, if you deny respect, you are building failure. Respect is not weakness, it is strength. It does not take away from you, it multiplies you. Because when people feel respected, they give back more than you ever imagined. The United States and India could have built one of the strongest partnerships in modern history. They had the population, the technology, the resources, and the values to stand together as equals. But equality was the missing piece, and without it, the illusion of partnership shattered. So, who is responsible for the breakup? Both sides played their part, yes. But the final crack came from a failure to respect the psychology of dignity. America miscalculated, India resisted, and the bond could not survive. And here is what I want you to take away: never underestimate the power of respect. Respect is the glue that holds people together. Respect is the fuel that makes relationships last. Respect is the bridge that allows strength to be shared instead of feared. In the end, nations rise and fall, alliances come and go. But the truth remains the same in life and in politics. If you want loyalty, if you want trust, if you want strength, you must first give respect.